Next, I'd like to introduce Francis Bouchard, Group Head of Public Affairs and Sustainability for Zurich Insurance.
Thank you, Commissioner Kreidler, Jay Bruns, and the whole team for the invitation to present at this important climate summit. My name is Francis Bouchard, and I'm the Head of Public Affairs and Sustainability for Zurich Insurance Group. Zurich is a large global insurance company that's been active in the United States market for over 100 years and writes insurance in all 50 states. I'm honored to be here today, not only as the only non-Washington-based company presenting as part of the Role of the Private Sector series, but I guess I'm even more humbled to be sharing the stage here in a way with companies that are truly showing what leadership by example means. I hope Zurich's journey can live up to those high standards. And while I haven't participated in all these summits, I would suspect to say that the private sector presentations you're hearing or will hear today are really going through quite a transformation from what you first heard. They're probably moving from awareness and perhaps some understanding and firmly into the action advocacy mode. I think that says a lot about the progress we're making as a private sector on this topic of climate change. And when we think about the role that the private sector plays, I find it difficult to separate the concept of the private sector from society's progress on climate change. After all, we're talking about a historic economic transformation. And by very definition, those economic actors are going to play a major role. When individual companies are faced with deciding what role they want to play on the climate topic, I would suggest they have to ask themselves three primary questions. First, how does climate change stack up against your own value structure? Second, how does action or inaction on the climate relate to your role in society? And how do you scale your impact by driving change within the systems in which you operate? On the values question, climate has always been aligned with Zurich's intrinsic moral compass. Maybe it's because we're a European company, but we've always seen a broader social obligation in our reason for being. Stakeholder capitalism isn't new to a 150-year-old Swiss company, particularly one that was originally founded as a state fund for workers injured in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. And today, that belief set is reflected in an ethos that's built around the concept of achieving a brighter future together. And one can't be serious about any of those words, achieving, brighter, future, or together, without committing oneself to taking action on climate change. Those values then made it an easy decision for Zurich to be the first insurer to sign the UN business ambition for a 1.5 degree future. That's a value statement for us, not an operational target. And once values are aligned, companies need to ask how they define their role in society. This isn't a technical exercise, and it's not achieved by listing the products and services you offer. It's a deeper understanding of how you affect those who rely on you. For example, as an insurance company, our role may seem obvious, particularly as the US endures ravages of wildfires, hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes. With all that destruction, it's obvious that our role is to pay claims after disaster strikes. But our role runs deeper, much deeper. It's to protect people. It's to create transparency around the risks that we take and to align thought and action around resilience behaviors. Understanding this moves us far beyond paying claims and leads us to create institutions like the Institute for Business and Home Safety or the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety or Underwriters Laboratory even. Institutions that literally define risk awareness in the country. And it means that on climate change, we must find ways to deliver on that role that goes well beyond paying claims. So with the value demanding you act and your role in society defined broadly, companies must then begin to identify the system level impact they can drive to truly achieve scale. Because achieving net zero on one's own isn't enough. Those are simply the pebbles that each company will create, or in the case of efforts like Amazon or Microsoft, the boulders they will create. It's the ripples those pebbles and boulders can make through formal or even informal systems that will ultimately define the leadership role that the private sector will play. Let me provide a few examples from Zurich's own journey to achieving the 1.5 degree future. Let's start with one that we often overlook, our people. In late 2018, Zurich launched an internal social media platform to facilitate dialogue and peer-to-peer exchange. Not surprisingly, employees organically began to share information on sustainability and climate issues, and soon a community of thousands of people began to challenge one another, share best practices, and organize around collective action. Similarly, earlier this year, we organized a global 3-day workshop where we trained hundreds of our key market-facing underwriters on the science of climate risks, the economics of the real economy transitions, and the role that Zurich sees itself playing in these challenges. Both are meaningful and important pebbles. But the real impact was actually in the ripples that these empowerment exercises facilitated. All of a sudden, our change catalyst groups like Make the Difference and Next Generation were leading the charge on changing internal policies and demanding external action. We were banning plastics, revisiting sourcing in our cafeterias, raising bees on our roof, and even removing trash cans from cubicles. None of these were centrally driven. Suddenly, our strategy team was repurposing commercial platforms like our World Innovation Championship, where we work with startup companies, or our Zurich Hackathon to focus on how to accelerate action on climate through technology. Our HR people began to insist on adding climate and sustainability materials in our recruiting and onboarding efforts. And our market-facing people, our ultimate ambassadors to our clients, began sparking discussions that they never had before on who's doing what to move the transition forward. Similarly, in our operations system, we've set and exceeded all our carbon reduction targets and now stand roughly 30% below our 2015 emission levels. Next steps will be to set science-based targets to drive our path to net zero by 2050, or even sooner if possible. The pebbles we drove to get there were insisting on platinum LEED certification on our new buildings in Illinois, Spain, and Switzerland, committing to 100% renewable energy sources by 2023, replacing business travel with digital platforms, even pre-COVID, and a myriad of other steps. These ripples, though, extended to our vendors, our architects, our construction firms, our food and beverage suppliers, and even our other partners, including, dare I say, Microsoft. Many told us they'd never been asked to conduct such changes. Others, of course, were already on their own journeys. But these are relatively narrow or contained systems. The real impact starts to be felt, or at least seen, envisioned, when you start to think about the role we play as an institutional investor. Zurich manages a portfolio of over $200 billion. And in 2013, we announced that we would do two things. The first was to require all our external investment management partners to undertake meaningful ESG training. A pebble. Today, 96% of our in-scope assets are managed by a firm that has undertaken, implemented such training. Some of those firms have actually told me that Zurich prompted them to take fundamental changes, a ripple. The second commitment we made was to invest $1 billion in green bonds and to work with other institutional investors and Cambridge's Institute for Sustainable Leadership to develop taxonomy and standards, pebbles. Today, we invest nearly $5 billion across our impact investment portfolio, and the green bond sector has experienced dramatic growth, not only in the US, but in other parts of the world, ripples. But counting dollars isn't the real point. It's measuring impact. So we partnered with BlackRock to develop an impact measurement framework to drive our impact investment strategy. To date, we have benefited 4.2 million people and avoided 2.8 million tons of CO2 through our impact investing strategy. More recently, we announced a new pebble, joining the UN-sponsored Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance and committing to apply science-based targets as a pathway to ensuring a net zero investment portfolio by 2050. As part of the alliance, we are also engaging key sectors directly in their transition pathways, as well as advocating for necessary policy regimes like a carbon tax. It's still unclear what ripples this will create, but rest assured that finding new ways to steer the $5 trillion of assets under management by Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance members will surely have an impact. But that brings us to our ultimate system, our customers, and the products and services they purchase from us. Admittedly, this is probably the least developed, as we've struggled with how to send risk signals about climate change, a risk that in some cases may not manifest for 20 years, into a 12-month insurance contract. In some cases, those signals are rather blunt, like withdrawing from the most heavily emitting sectors like thermal coal. But insurers' role in sectoral transitions are not binary. We are not only there to either perpetuate a carbon-intensive economy or abandon markets wholesale. Using our risk lens, we can facilitate, if not accelerate, the transitions that critical economic sectors are already pursuing. Let me provide 3 examples. First, Zurich recently joined Field to Market, a consortium of large food processors, farmers, and others that literally and figuratively bring together both ends of the food chain to accelerate the deployment of carbon-positive agricultural practices. Our goal, as the nation's second largest crop insurer, is to figure out if insurance has a role to play in helping farmers who want to adopt regenerative ag practices to get there safely. Remember, carbon-intensive farming doesn't just sequester dramatically more carbon from the atmosphere, it also withstands drought better. It is more flood resilient, and it produces much more nutritious crops. And as the Terraton Initiative argues, if regenerative agriculture ever achieves scale, it could possibly have the single most dramatic impact on atmospheric carbon levels. Quite a ripple. A second example of acting as a facilitator of transition is our focus on carbon capture and sequestration technologies. Last week, the Energy Transition Commission highlighted the role that CCS will play in buying us time to get to a true net zero production status. Zurich has the industry's first, and I believe the only, dedicated CCS product, which we believe should help the deployment of more of these products as demand increases. And finally, sometimes we need to deliver our expertise and knowledge outside of the standard insurance policy. This is why we embrace disclosure regimes like the TCFD, because without knowledge, we'll never develop the solutions our customers need. It is why we recently announced a new climate resilience advisory service to help companies better understand their physical risk exposure. And it is why we have issued nearly 20 post-event review capability reports detailing how a physical event too often becomes a not so natural disaster. And our people, like I'm doing today, are constantly speaking at industry gatherings, sharing knowledge and listening as well. Let me close by observing that system-level engagements on climate are facilitated today by an amazing array of innovative partnerships that are emerging in this space. Our DNA is to partner with others, as reflected in our Brighter Future Together ethos. It's also reflected in how we structured our award-winning Flood Resilience Alliance, where we brought together leading academics, global NGOs, and our own internal experts to use knowledge to enhance the resilience of over 200 communities across the developing world. The same ethos shows in our partnership with SBP, a leading risk and resilience nonprofit in the US that's leading innovative ways to improve the nation's disaster recovery mechanism, particularly for the most vulnerable in society. And it's reflected in our membership in coalitions across the world, ranging from the UNPRI and UNPSI to the Net Zero Alliance, the Coalition for Climate Resilient Infrastructure, and others. I know, lots of letters, but a lot of activity. Climate change impact is the ultimate team sport. In the sense of possibility these partnerships exude is what gives me hope that the private sector will lead this transition. Thank you for inviting me to the summit, and I look forward to hearing more from other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bouchard. We're taking virtual questions in the chat area and on our LinkedIn event page posted in the comments section. Visit the page later to view answers, ask additional questions, and join in the discussion.